Joining us is a man right now who needs very little introduction. He's the best no-gi grappler on the planet, maybe of all time, and now is dipping his toes into the coaching waters. He is known as the King. It's Gordon Ryan. Hi, Gordon. How are you?
I'm good. I can't complain. We just had that match. Who's number one, and then I went out to see Jon for a little bit and got some training in. So I can't complain. We're doing all right.
All right. Well, before we talk about Jon, let's talk about you very quickly, if we can. Your health update. You look to be fine. I saw you compete against Patrick Gaudio. You beat him by armbar at Who's Number One, calling it that it was going to be an armbar. Quite impressive. But there was a scare recently where it looked like you were in some dire straits. What is the situation with your health?
Yeah. So I had some crazy antibiotic-resistant strep throat that I was on antibiotics like 45 days straight, and the original issue with my stomach was I was on antibiotics for staph like over and over and over again. And that's what caused my initial stomach issues. And so my stomach was doing really, really good. And then I was on 45 days of antibiotics for strep. So it kind of reset a little bit. And it's not as good as it was before ADCC, but it's definitely not as bad as it was, when I wasn't competing. So then I got my tonsils taken out because I thought it had colonized in my tonsils. And then they were playing the surgery and they're like, well, let's scope your nose to see if you have a deviated septum, because if you have a deviated septum, you may as well do that. So I was like 45 days antibiotics and like 2 weeks until the surgery, where I didn't want to train anymore because if I colonized, my immune system was compromised. It would just come right back, and then I'd have to do more antibiotics before I could do the surgery. So they scoped my nose and my septum was severely deviated. So they did the surgery on the deviated septum and the tonsillectomy at the same time. And then I was out for like another 8 weeks because I couldn't get my nose hit, and I had a giant open wound in the back of my throat. And I couldn't eat for like 2 weeks after. So I posted a picture of me like at my worst, like 200 pounds. Like I couldn't eat anything, couldn't drink anything hardly, and I was just like all messed up. And then I actually got really big because then I started lifting weights, but I wasn't doing jiu-jitsu yet because I couldn't. So I went from like 225 to like 200 pounds, and then right back up to 225. And then I started lifting and I went up to like 245. So I was like kind of all over the place. But now I'm like actually my normal weight. I'm like 225, 230. And stomach's doing decent, not great. It's still far away from being where it needs to be, but it's definitely a lot better, and I can at least compete on it now. So I'm happy with it, but not satisfied because it's not 100%. But it's a work in progress.
I had a balloon plasty in my nose one time to open up all the kinds of blockages. That I have to tell you, nose surgery might be the worst. Was that your experience as well?
Well, the combination of the two, because you have like the stents in there after, and like my throat was on fire. So it's like the combination of the nose hurting and the stents in your nose. You can't touch your nose. You're bleeding out of your nose constantly. The back of my throat feels like it's on fire. You can't eat anything. So the combination of the two was definitely moderately bad. But at the same time, it's like 10 days of suffering for like a lifetime of not getting strep throat and being able to breathe and like not snore when you sleep. So it's like an easy trade-off for me.
All right, last question on this, which is, to what extent are you worried about recurrent problems or other flare-ups, I suppose, related to not so much this illness, but whatever's been plaguing you related to your stomach? Or I don't know, how much is this, do you feel like, is contained?
Well, the stomach, I've been on treatment now for like two years, about two and a half years, 2.5 years now, I would say. Yeah, definitely 2.5 years. And like it's getting better. It's just taking forever because it was 3 years of just like uncontained like fungal growth in mine. So basically what happened was I was on staph. I had staph, and I was on oral antibiotics over and over and over again. And that just wiped out all the good bacteria. And then it got repopulated with bad bacteria and a giant fungal overgrowth. I had mold poisoning. So there's like a bunch of issues that all stem from not having enough good bacteria because of the antibiotics that I was taking. And so now I've been on treatment for like 2.5 years. Every time I do the test, the numbers are coming down, but they were so high to begin with that it's still like way above what normal is. Like my fungal count is still 3 times what it's supposed to be. So everything was like way into the red. Like one of the numbers that I had for like one of the myotoxins and the mold poisoning, like anything like 0 to 5 units was normal, and then 5 to 10 was moderate, and above 10 was like severe, was high. Like mine was 555. So it was like 50 times what was supposed to be. So now everything's coming down. So it's definitely doing a lot better. It's just a time thing. I have to just keep on this protocol until it eventually gets better. But it's like halfway there, 70% there, so somewhere. It relapsed after the month and a half of antibiotics, but it's doing better for sure.
All right. Well, glad to hear it. That sounds pretty crazy. Okay. So let's talk about this sort of interesting scenario that you find yourself in, which is, okay, well, you tell me, what are you to Jon Jones? You're not a training partner. You're a little bit more than that. What are you?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm not a coach. I'm not like a full-time coach, but when I go there, to train with him, obviously, just so he feels, what it's like to train with, good grapplers. But most of what I do, and especially with his training regimen, most of what I do is teaching. So I'll coach him, and he kind of learns different than everyone else. Where it's not like, hey, let's work on this. It's his brain kind of fires from like movement to movement. So it's not like, oh, hey, let's work on Darces the whole time, and then after Darces, then we move on to something else. It's like, oh, hey, teach me a Darce. And it's like, okay, well, now I have a turtle question. All right, well, now I have a guard question. Well, now I have a wrestling question. And so we kind of just bounce around from situation to situation, and that's how he tends to learn best. So I kind of just I just come in, and if there's something I feel like he needs to do, I'll tell him like, no, we're working on this today. But for the most part, I just let him run the practice and creatively run through what he wants to learn. And then he just gives me a general idea and direction. And then I just run with that. And so I teach him most of the time that we're there. And then we'll do like some training, some hand fighting, some wrestling, some groundwork. And just so he feels, at different paces what it's like. And, just work like that. But most of what I do is just I'm there to teach him and to improve upon skill and knowledge.
How did you two get linked up?
He messaged me on Instagram. We would talk like in the comments sometimes here and there. And he messaged me on Instagram one day, and he's like, hey man, like I have a camp, coming up, and I want you to come out and to work with me. And, most MMA guys, especially, I was known originally for leg locks. He's like, oh man, I'm like really interested in learning leg locks, and just not even he's going to use them in the fight, just that he just wants to learn them personally because it's not something that he's used to doing. So he brought me in originally, which was very curious about leg locks because he thought I was a leg lock guy. And then he saw that I could do everything else just as good, if not better than leg locks. So then we kind of just branched out into different things. And I kind of went over the just full scope of grappling with him, and just kind of bounced around based on what he was asking.
That's interesting. So he kind of had you pegged as a leg lock guy. Why would Jon Jones need leg? I mean, I guess every high level fighter needs some version of leg lock defense and offense, right? Like some literacy around the positions. But does Jon Jones have a great need for leg locks? I don't know that he does, right?
No, I don't think so. I think it was just something that, I mean, leg locks is what I was originally famous for, what I originally was known for. So even like most guys today, now it's starting to change, but guys are up until the last ADCC, they're like, oh, just a leg lock guy, and I'm like, no. And so I think that he originally brought me in and was just curious about leg locks. I don't know if he wants to particularly use them in fights, but I think that it's just something, especially with fighters, that it's so foreign to them that they just want to learn a little bit about it and see if they can kind of integrate it into their game. Because in fighting, obviously, if you go for leg locks, there is a chance that you can get punched and things like that. But at the same time, the leg lock defense is so low in MMA that if you do have good leg locks, it's pretty easy to actually finish someone. So there's kind of a balance you have to play between not getting knocked out and being good enough to actually finish guys who won't tap at a high level, but don't really know how to defend. And so I think that he was more just interested initially in learning them just because he was interested in them, not necessarily because he wants to use them. But then, we went over some of that stuff, and he started asking questions about different positions, and he's like, oh, like you actually can teach in like any position. Any question you ask, I can answer, or I ask, you can answer. And I was like, well, yeah. So we started branching out from there, and then now I was here the second time, so he kind of knows my game, and I know his game, and I know how he learns. So now I just let him lead the practice, and whatever he asks, we just kind of go over.
It's kind of funny when the news broke, or there was social media posts anyway that you guys were linking up to train together. I saw some people being like, "Oh, why would Jon do this? Like, learning how to grapple like Gordon Ryan won't serve him in MMA." And I'm like, First of all, I'm not even sure that's true, but either way, not the point, right? Like, you're not trying to teach him to be you. You're trying to give him things that the MMA grappling game misses that you might be able to identify and then add, and therefore he has now something that the rest of the pack wouldn't. Is that a fair assessment of the kind of value add you're providing?
That's correct. And also, one of the absolute biggest parts of my game that no one ever even mentions is the fact that when I put people in bottom position, they can't stand up. The number one issue that jiu-jitsu guys have when they go into fighting is that, number one, their takedowns are terrible and they don't integrate striking with takedowns well. And if they actually do get on top of a guy, they have no ability to hold him down, because in jiu-jitsu, there's the unspoken rule of the bottom guy plays guard and the top guy tries to pass. In MMA, most of the time you put a guy's butt down and he immediately tries to stand back up. And so the average jiu-jitsu guy has no clue how to actually hold someone down when they don't want to be held down. And one of the staples of my game is, if you look at my match with Andre, if you look at my match with Gaudio, with Kyle Boehm, with Wagner, with any of the guys who I fought recently, who were in timed matches. Felipe, obviously, is different because it was a no time limit match, so I didn't put too much energy into holding him down initially. But any guys who I grapple under time circumstances and I don't want to stand up, they actually don't ever get up. And so that's the biggest thing that jiu-jitsu guys have issues with. So, and my whole bottom game is based on inside position, and inside position doesn't allow people to actually hit you with power. So my game the jiu-jitsu that Jon teaches is from when he was coaching GSP. It's like directly correlated to fighting, but everyone's too stupid to actually know that. Like, obviously, yeah, if I'm doing jiu-jitsu and I want to sit the guard and scoot towards the guy, like, it's sport jiu-jitsu. But with easy adjustments, you can just make it applicable for MMA. But no one ever talks about those points in my games. They're just like, oh, well, this guy can't wrestle, blah, 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 blah. But every time I ever wrestle, I win wrestling exchanges. I win wrestling exchanges. I put guys on bottom. They can't stand up. Like, my game is like built for fighting. It's not just like a sport jiu-jitsu game. But no one realizes that. But then when I train with people and they're pinned and like their legs are pinned and I have like their far wrists and their shoulders pinned to the ground and I have my hand cocked like I can punch them, then like after you train with me, then I'm like, oh, like maybe this guy could actually hold someone down and beat them up. But your average fan like just doesn't even understand that.
In terms of well, let me ask you, like, how did jiu-jitsu get to a place in your mind where this was such a missing skill, either in sport or in MMA? I do think that there is a turn happening where more guys are focused on pins, Turks, splits, that kind of a thing. But in general, it's just, why has this been a lagging development of jiu-jitsu rather than a leading one?
Rules. The more rules you have, the more people will try to game the system. And so one of the biggest events in the last 2 decades have been IBJJF events. And the IBJJF have added so many rules to their organization that it kind of allows athletes to game the system, and it takes away from what jiu-jitsu really is. Like, the foundation of jiu-jitsu is, I want to be able to control the guy and submit him. And if you take a takedown or if you sweep someone and in the first 5 minutes, then you can spend 5 minutes just doing enough to stall and, make it look like you're doing something, but you're not really doing anything. And you can kind of win by stalling. You do a knee cut, you stall, you do a knee cut, you stall, you move around, and it looks like you're doing something, but you're not. And so guys can game the system like this. But really the essence of jiu-jitsu is control that leads to submission. And if you can't hold the guy down, you can't control them. But there's no need to actually control people in like an IBJJF rule set, because you can just score and then not do anything. So the more rules you have, the more athletes will learn over time to game the system and play the rule sets. And so, that kind of is watered down what jiu-jitsu is. ADCC is most closely related because the wrestling in ADCC is much like MMA. It's pretty much the same thing, but with no strikes. Like, you take a guy down, he doesn't want to be held down. He's trying to get back up to avoid a score. The takedowns themselves don't actually mean anything. Like, the scoring for a takedown in ADCC is the same. It's 2 points regardless of the takedown, whereas in freestyle wrestling, you have different scoring criteria based on the amplitude of the throw. And then once you control the person after you take them down, that's what actually matters. It's not the takedown itself, it's the control after the takedown. And then you throw submissions in there, and you have basically MMA wrestling minus the strikes. And so ADCC is the most applicable uh, to fighting, which is what we train all the time. We're training wrestling for ADCC rules and grappling for ADCC rules. And the IBJJF is like a completely different scoring system with a lot more rules that kind of takes away and detracts from what jiu-jitsu is in terms of jiu-jitsu for fighting.
Got it. Okay. In terms of training with Jon, to what extent are you at all looking at what Stipe Miocic does in particular versus I'm the guy who's got all of the best practices. I don't need to look at what Stipe is doing. Is there where do you fall in that particular spectrum or binary, I should say?
I think, like I said, I kind of let Jon just like creatively run the practices. And I kind of he gives me like a direction and I follow the direction. But Stipe, there's nothing really special that he does as an MMA grappler. Like he's not bad, but it's not like he has like an amazing guillotine. It's not like he has like an amazing ability to hip heist up or an amazing triangle or armbar, or if he gets mounted on you, you're never going to get out. He's kind of just like a good generic all around guy. And so I think that, and obviously Jon studies a lot of tape on him as well. I think that Jon kind of, at this point, is just interested in doing things that he wants to improve upon as an athlete himself. And if there was one thing that I saw that Stipe did that was dangerous to Jon, or that I think could give Jon problems, then I would force Jon to be in those positions. But Stipe is not known as like a super dangerous grappler, so I think it's just overall Jon is just trying to improve as an athlete.
Right. I mean, if we're talking about Miocic's grappling, and what he has shown to this point, it's largely takedowns, maybe some version of control from turtle, some version of control from top, but not like savage ground and pound, not necessarily, not like aggressive guard passing, just more kind of like loose but effective control at times, right?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah. He did a really good job with Francis in the first fight of hitting strong reactive takedowns. Every time Francis would rush him, he would go and hit good reactive doubles and put Francis down. He was very successful at using power half Nelsons from turtle position, holding Francis down against the cage, even though he was like, I don't know, probably at the time he cuts 265. He was probably 50 pounds or more heavier than Stipe. And so Stipe did a really good job of hitting reactive takedowns, getting him deep on the legs, putting Francis down, and then making him carry body weight and holding him down from power half positions, from turtle position. And so there's things that he's definitely good at, but there's not like one thing that he's so overwhelmingly good at that he's gonna use to kill all the rest of the heavyweights in the division.
So when you there was actually a famous video where you were rolling with him. I'm sure you guys have rolled many times. Give me a sense. What's it like to roll with Jon Jones? What'd you learn about him?
So Jon is a lot like GSP. He's not the best wrestler in the world. He's not the best striker in the world. He's not the best at jiu-jitsu in the world. But when it's time to put things all together, just like George, he does it better than anybody else in the world. And so, like if you get a high-level wrestler, he's going to lose a wrestling match. If you get a high-level jiu-jitsu guy, there's like an ADCC champion, he'll lose a wrestling match, and he might lose a boxing match. But when it's time to actually fight, he's better than anybody else in the world. And the two things that impressed me to a very shocking degree with him was, number one, his ability to learn moves. Because most guys, especially at his level, who are successful, and most guys who are in their mid-30s and they already have an established game over 2 decades, they have their game, and then once you teach them something, they don't really retain it. It's like they have their game and that's it. With Jon, he's always looking to integrate new things into his game. And if he has like 5 different topics he asks me about, and I teach him 5 things, he might disregard 3 of them. But if he likes 2 of them, he will immediately like, okay, that's part of my game now. And he'll do it, he'll drill it, and then that's part of his game. And so I think that his ability to learn moves and integrate them into his game, like I'll teach him a move, and then by the end of the week, he will have not just a move, but he will use it. He will find ways to integrate it into different parts of his game for MMA. So I'll teach him a move from a certain position, and then 3 days later, he's using the move from 3 other different positions, or he'll use the move with 3 different setups that he came up with intuitively on his own. And so that was really impressive. Another thing that's really impressive is he has an incredible ability to intuitively change pace and change game plans through the course of a round or over the course of days or weeks. So like when I'm wrestling with him, like when I was first wrestling with him, like I was playing a game and I was having some success with a few moves, and then he kind of picked up on that pattern without me even telling him, and he changed that. So I tried it, the next round, and now I can't do it. So I have to change my game. And so we have like this whole dynamic thing that we do where we are changing what we do to adjust to each other the whole time. So the game that we each played in the beginning and the first round will look nothing like the game that we're playing in the fifth round. Like it'll be completely different. And so as he changes, I can't do the same thing anymore. So I have to change intuitively. And so he's not like one of the guys who was like, this is my game plan, this is what I'm going to do. And he just hammers away at it, whether it works or not. If something's not working, he'll instantly change it. And there's like almost no athletes that I've ever found rolling with in the world that can do it to the level that he can do it. Like he's changing pace just as fast as I am. And there's like no one that I've trained with that can change a game plan mid-round just as fast as I can change. And so he has a lot of tools, and he's willing to go out of his way, even if he's not super comfortable, to just change his game plan and use things and mix it up and show things that he doesn't really usually do, just to change the game plan and change the pace of the match. And so that was the most impressive thing for me.
It's interesting. In terms of the striking side of the conversation, a lot of the conversation over the course of Jon Jones's career has been about his reach, which is unusual, 84-inch reach for a guy who's 6'4", 6'5". That is, that's the same reach that like Semi Schilt had, and Semi Schilt was a 7-footer approximately. So, he has a really unusual reach. And when you think about guys with long limbs in jiu-jitsu, I don't even know if this is fair, but you tend to think about like the lanky guard players, which of course that's really not who he is. To what extent does his dimensions impact his game at all?
I definitely think that, overall physicality and physical attributes do play a big role. And I definitely think that helps him. But I honestly think that he just has a better understanding of fighting than most people. The things that he does and the way that he creatively works, I think it goes a lot further than just his physical attributes. Like everyone talks about his reach, but I think that he would be just as successful if he was like a normal sized person. I think if you have like a 75-inch reach, he would be just as successful as he is now. I think that he's just better than the people that he fights. Like just having a long reach doesn't have you at 27-1, really 28-0, and winning a UFC title at, I think it was 23 when he won, and he's still the champion now at 36. Like that goes, you have to have a lot more than the reach to do that. There's plenty of guys with long reaches that aren't successful like him. And I think that the knowledge and skills that he possesses is really what makes him successful. The reach obviously helps, but it's not a key factor in why he wins.
Okay, fair enough. So I don't mean to say he doesn't have high fight IQ. He does obviously have very high fight IQ. And anyone who's followed his career for some time can know that. I guess what I'm wondering is, maybe I should ask the question the wrong way. If you have the kinds of dimensions that he has, I mean, everyone's dimensions are to an extent, right, going to define the kind of game that they have in whether it's striking or wrestling or jiu-jitsu. Like it will play some role. For someone like him, I guess what you're saying is, it might impact it to a degree, but really what drives it is the overall decision making, not that he's making accommodations in one direction or the other around the particular dimensions that he has. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that his game is structured around his physical attributes, just like mine are. Like I'm not a very athletic guy. Like sure, I can like invert, and I'm like physically isometrically strong. But if I did like a high jump or like a 40-yard dash, I'm not like particularly athletic. But I'm isometrically strong. So I base my game, instead of basing my game around movement and trying to be more athletic, I base my game around negation of movement, and I try to make the other guy less athletic than me by wedging him in place, by using pins, isometric strength, things like that. And so I think that he bases his game, a little bit around the reach and the physical attributes, and he does a good job of, sticking his hand out and making sure guys can't come towards him. He covers hands well. When he throws elbows, he has that extra. The top part of his arm is a lot longer. So I think he bases some part of his game around the physical attributes, but I don't think that his entire game is built around physical attributes. Where a lot of people, like most of their game is built around physicality, and if they weren't as physical, they wouldn't be nearly as successful. And that's not the case with Jon at all.
If I can make a sort of a broader question, Let me ask it open-ended this way.
Okay.
What should a high-level MMA grappler be good at? What areas necessitate the highest degree of advancement? What are some other ones that maybe aren't as important?
That's a good question. I think that number one, you have to have the ability, if you're a grappler, you have to have the ability to actually, of course, take the fight to the ground. So that means you have to have good reactive and proactive takedowns in the open, like a GSP, for example, where either you throw punches, get the guy's hands up, and then you shoot takedowns, or like George was very good at throwing jabs, the guy would chase him, and then reactive takedowns, put the guy down, or push him to the fence and put him down. So being able to put him down in the open, being able to put him down on the fence like Khabib, where you would apply body weight on the fence, put the guy down, and then obviously once you get them down, being able to hold them down. And as you get on top of them, if you can't hold them down and can't do damage, it's useless. So holding them down, stopping the initial explosion up, and then being able to have a combination of working through a hierarchy of pins while also having open hands to be able to punch when you have to, while still holding people down. When they're trying to get up, if they're going to get up, it shouldn't be for free. It should be them getting up, carrying your body weight. And if they're not carrying body weight as they're getting up, they should be getting hit. So the ability to take people down from top position, take people down in the open, take people down in the fence, make them carry body weight when you're on top of them. And if they're not carrying body weight and they are getting up, being able to hit them. So those are the four most important things for me. And obviously being able to do damage or have strong submissions to actually finish the fight. From bottom position, it's keeping inside position, having a dangerous guard where people are timid and reluctant to come into your guard because of the fact that you're so dangerous. So they play on the outside, which will mean that your guard's so dangerous that if they engage you, they get finished. If they don't engage you, you can heist up. And having the ability to hip heist back up to your feet and stand up when someone's trying to keep you down so that you can dictate where the fight goes. And I think those are the most important things. And it comes down to the same thing we always talk about is control that leads to submission, either from top or bottom position.
To what extent? It's interesting. You didn't mention, I mean, you may have been including it, so I just want to double check. What role does the back play? And more particular, what role should the back play for an MMA grappler at heavyweight?
Well, the thing with the back is, number one, that you have the gloves, which makes it harder to strangle with gloves on. Not impossible, but harder. And number two, when you have someone's back, you are carrying their body weight because their hips are higher than yours. So, you can still obviously finish from the back. It's the best pin in a grappling context. But really, what the luxury you have in MMA is that if you feel like you're fighting from the back and you can't finish, instead of burning your forearms out, number one, and number two, you only have 5-minute rounds. And so it's unlikely you're going to be on the guy's back for more than 4 minutes. So if you have 2 minutes to submit someone from the back, maybe you won't be able to do it, especially if he has good hand fighting. But the luxury you have is that if you can't finish a guy and you're carrying his body weight, what you can do is you can start punching strangle hands across, and then you can start bridging and taking the guy belly down. And belly down, now he's carrying your body weight, and you can start throwing heavy strikes as well. And so the combination of being able to strangle someone from the back and being able to put them belly down, make them carry body weight, and punch them, and using punches and strikes to open up, getting strangles, the most famous one is Nate Diaz versus Conor, where he puts him down, puts him belly down, flurries him with punches, and then Conor goes to move and he strangles him. I think the combination of those two is very important. But I don't think that you can just be a strangle guy and just do traditional jiu-jitsu. I think you can do it, but I think you'll have a lot more success integrating strikes into that and putting the guy belly down and punching him, letting him turn to mount, punching him, making him carry body weight, and just wearing the guy out over time, which is what Khabib's a master of.
Okay, so given all of this delineation, which is very helpful, and I really appreciate it, just speaking candidly, how many guys not named Jon Jones can do these things at heavyweight?
Well, that's the thing. It's tough. I think that when DC was fighting, I think DC obviously comes from a very high level of wrestling pedigree, so he was good at it. He did a phenomenal job with Derek Lewis, just kind of touching his legs and controlling him on the ground. And there are guys who can do stuff like that, but obviously the higher the weight class in general, the lower the technique is. There are exceptions, obviously, but it's going to be hard to find. It's hard to find like real good grapplers in the heavyweight division. But the heavyweights present other interesting problems too. Like you have like a Derek Lewis who's just like, oh, like what is jiu-jitsu? Just stand up. Like it sounds funny when you have a guy that big who like just wants to explode and just get up. Like it's hard to hold them down. Like you underestimate it. So when you have people who are that big, they present different problems that don't necessarily correlate with like your normal like technical level of jiu-jitsu. Like they do things that like mechanically shouldn't work, but they're just so big they just get up, or they just they explode out. And so there's other issues associated with that. But on a technical level, it's hard to find guys who are the technical prowess is that good where they can do all of those things.
Are there MMA grapplers out there who, again, we're not saying that they would win ADCC, but for what they're doing in MMA, whose games out there do you like on the grappling side?
Well, obviously, you got to go when George was fighting. George was incredible. He wasn't the best wrestler. He wasn't the best jiu-jitsu guy. But when it was time to fight, he was the best. He would put guys down. His shoot boxing, his feinting was amazing, and he would hold guys down. And he was impossible to hold down. So George is a great example. Khabib is another great example. Like Khabib just wears guys out. He walks guys down. He doesn't even shuffle towards guys a lot of times. He just like literally walks. So you can't get away from him. You can't shuffle backwards faster than Khabib walks towards you. So he just walks guys to the fence, makes them carry body weight, puts them down, beats them up, and guys are exhausted. So George is good. Khabib is good. Damian Maia has a really good system where he shoots the sloppy shots, pushes the guy to the fence, and then uses the fence to start taking guys down, or he either pulls half and then tries to roll the guy through, or he comes up to their back and then controls them like that. So Damian had a pretty good system. Charles Oliveira obviously has the most submissions, I think, in UFC history. So you have to give him some props as well. But for me, it's always guys who play like a heavy pressure game over time, like and just control guys and wear guys out and make them carry body weight. So my top two are George and Khabib for sure.
Alexander Volkanovski had an interesting comment recently that I thought was pretty correct, but I wonder what you make of it, which was that he was like, listen, if you just look at like traditional submissions and entries and whatnot, yeah, Charles Oliveira has better jiu-jitsu. But if you actually look at who is dictating where the fight goes and is maintaining top control, it's Islam Makhachev all day. I actually found that to be quite correct. I wonder what you make of that assessment.
Yes. Charles is more of an opportunistic fighter when it comes to locking in submissions and finishing the fight. Like if the opportunity is there, and he will take it for sure. Whereas Makhachev and Khabib are like deliberate guys. Like they have deliberate actions which create pressure over time, and they work towards submissions. Whereas Oliveira doesn't really have pressure over time. It's more of, okay, we're in a scramble, or if we're in guard or whatever the case is, or through an exchange, he sees the opportunity for submission, he'll take it and he'll finish you, and he's very, very good at that. Whereas Khabib and Makhachev are like very deliberate. Everything they do has a purpose, and it's just like pressure over time until the guy physically and then mentally breaks, and then the submission comes, which for me is the ultimate. That's my favorite. It's one thing to just be an opportunistic fighter where, okay, the guy goes for a takedown, I shoot a guillotine and I finish him, to I'm going to walk this guy down to the cage. I'm going to put him down. He's going to try to get up. I'm going to drag him back down 3, 4, 5 times. I'm going to be chest to chest and half guard passing, punching him. Then I'm going to pass him into mount, and then he's exhausted, and then I'm going to put him away. That is like, for me, that's better for MMA because you can dictate what happens, the pace of the fight. Like he controls everything. Like Khabib with Gaethje. Like Gaethje was exhausted like immediately. He walked him down and he controlled the pace. Everything he did was deliberate. He was carrying body weight the whole time, and it was like watching a video game. You just saw like Gaethje's energy level just go down like this until eventually got submitted. So for me, that's preferable.
I do want to have a couple more questions. I appreciate your time. One thing I would love to just pick your brain on a little bit is going back to the back a little bit. We've seen that this has been true in sport jiu-jitsu, and you've done a lot of it at times, but now it's obviously much more prominent among some of the more high-level operators in MMA. So I'll give you a great example, Aljamain Sterling. Well, he'll go for takedowns that he knows are not going to work, But let's say, for example, he just wants Petr Yan to plant his hands on the mat, so that he just creates back exposure, and then he just goes right to the back. And sometimes these don't even happen off offensive takedowns. Sometimes they happen off defensive responses to takedowns. These paths to the back that are quicker and more unusual than the old meta. You're a fan of this, or it really depends on someone being a very skilled operator from the back?
No, I'm a fan of it just because inherently you have such an advantage when you're behind someone. Like the biggest thing when you're on someone's back isn't really that you can attack them. It's that you can attack them and they can't attack you. Like there's no danger whatsoever, basically, from a situation where I'm behind your elbows and I'm attacking you from the back. There's no offense. Like you can't knock me out from there. You can't submit me from there. So the real advantage isn't that just you can attack them effectively. It's also that they can't attack you. You're no danger of getting damaged or getting finished when you're behind someone. And so getting behind someone in general, whether it's from turtle position, whether it's standing, whether it's you actually have hooks in and you're taking their back, just getting behind the elbows, again, flanking the elbows and getting behind the elbows when you're chest to back in some way, just inherently is a great position. So for sure, I think that's the ultimate position because you can attack them and they can't attack you. But at the same time, it has to transcend. It has to go further than what just sport jiu-jitsu is. And you have to be able to integrate punches and strikes and other different various tactical nuances and technical nuances to actually make it work at the highest levels consistently against the best MMA fighters.
Got it. Okay. Now, listen, I hate to bring this up, but I just have to because people brought it up to me when I told them I was going to talk to you, which is that it just seems kind of interesting that you're looking at some of the more high-level fighters in MMA, right? Guys in that top 5 pound-for-pound space, right? That's sort of the level of what we're talking about. And Volkanovski brought in, I know your old training partner, Craig Jones, and it seemed to have a dramatic impact. I'm wondering, what is it? Is it because, like, he brought in some of the Sumigashi stuff and also just kind of like these ideas around pinning as well. What is who is the originator behind this move towards pinning and control in jiu-jitsu? I know he's got the whole BJJ Fanatics instructional on it. I've seen most of it, but who was the real originator of these ideas?
It's John. Craig was obviously had some success before he came to the team and was competing at ADCC, and he did 2 ADCCs before he came to the team. But he was very good at what he did. His A game was very good before he got here, but it was a very limited game beyond his A game. There wasn't a layered approach, and so training with John for 3 years. I mean, I can see why Craig made such an improvement in Volkanovski because Craig's whole game is set up to be a game for fighting. He's not as good at holding people down, at pinning. He's not as good as me at the stuff that he does. But his game is set up for fighting because he's learned most of what he knows from John and from me. So he's definitely better than most guys that were going to come in and just like be tough training partners for Volkanovski. He can actually teach Volkanovski how to do jiu-jitsu. And so I'm not surprised that Volkanovski had a huge jump in his technical level working with Craig. That's not a surprise. But it all has originated from John. I mean, John's been teaching MMA a lot longer than he's been teaching jiu-jitsu at a high level. And all the stuff that he teaches us is just stuff that he would teach George just at a higher level technically. But it's derived from watching George and coaching George fighting for 2 decades. So everything that he teaches us can be easily adapted and applied to actual fighting.
Fair enough. All right, let's wrap up on this a little bit. So the calendar for John, he fights not this month, but the end of next month, right around then, or middle part anyway. Are you going to be in his corner on fight night? What's the plan between now and the Stipe Miocic fight?
So he hasn't actually been in his corner. I don't think I'm going to be in his corner. I don't really know if there's any need for that because if he wants me to be in his corner, I think that I'd be more than happy to. But he has jiu-jitsu coaches, and I think that they can get him. They can tell him the information that he needs if he needs, grappling coaching. But if he wants me to be in his corner, I'll definitely be in his corner. I'm going to be there regardless. I think the UFC needs me there for some media stuff that week because I'm going to be trying to compete on the December 9th card. I'm trying to get an opponent for that now for Fight Pass. So they're going to be trying to promote that, and they need me to do some media stuff. So I'm probably going to be in New York that week anyway, or the couple days before the fight. So I'll be happy to corner him if he wants, but otherwise I'll just be there, and then we'll kind of hang out, beforehand and afterwards. But it's really up to him. I just, he gives me direction, I follow the direction, and then he works best like that. So whatever he needs, I'll be there for.
I know you don't love New York, even though you lived there a long time. I love New York, Gordon Ryan. I have to tell you, I'm not saying Austin's not great. I haven't been there in a long time, but I do love New York City. It is a great place. Sorry.
It has some cool things. The thing for me was that the only redeeming quality for me about New York was the food, and my stomach was so messed up that I couldn't even go to restaurants when I was there. So it was just like I would pay so much extra money for everything and get nothing. I wasn't going out to clubs because I had to wake up early. I wasn't going to restaurants. It was just like smelly subways, crowded, miserable people, like traffic everywhere. I was just I can't do this, man.
I get it. All right. So last question for you. You indicated you might be trying to compete for the Fight Pass Invitational. Give me a sense. We're now in October. Give me a sense of the rest of your year. What's on the docket that you're trying to do? Give me the Gordon Ryan plan.
So I have Lucas Barboza announced and scheduled for who's number one for November 30th. So I'll compete against him, and then market some new whatever instructional I'm filming next, probably, and finish him with whatever that submission is. And then December 9th, we're trying to get an opponent signed for Fight Pass. So that's coming right after. And then I'm not sure, but there's some Russian guy. Everyone's like, oh, he knows his name. I literally don't know his name. He's some Russian guy, some Russian name, I don't know how to pronounce it, who's been calling me out. He just had a good performance on Aiga in Kazakhstan. So if he agrees to a 30-minute match, that's on like December 14th or 15th, whatever that next weekend is. If he agrees to a 30-minute match, then I'm going to go to Kazakhstan the week after and compete against him. If not, then I'm just going to take the rest of the year from like December 10th until New Year's, and then kind of figure out how to compete. I'll probably do like two, maybe one, January, March, April, and then take a rest after that, and then do like June, like probably mid to late June or early July, and then ADCC in August, and then go from there.
Now, this is my last question for ADCC. Correct me if I'm wrong. I can't quite remember this because it catch me off guard. Did they agree that you could do both weight class and super fight for this upcoming 2024?
So what I'm trying to do, because I did the weight class and the super fight last year.
Yep.
So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get a second super fight for Saturday. So I'm trying to do a super fight on Saturday with a big name and have them count it as an official medal. I don't know if they're going to do that, but that's what I plan to do. And then do the super fight against Yuri, because now I have teammates in the divisions. I have, there's Luke, there's Marigali, there's Big Dan, there's guys who are doing those both plus and minus 99. So I really want to lead the divisions, for those guys and not have to compete against those guys, because when I competed against Gary, it was like the saddest moment of my career. I felt so bad. But at the same time, I need to build a legacy. So I'm really pushing for Saturday and Sunday super fights. But if not, then I'm going to ask them to do the super fight, and I'm going to ask them to do plus 99 and minus 99. So they're 2 weight divisions plus a super fight. But I don't know if they're going to let me. I don't know if they're going to let me do either of those. So we'll see.
All right. Well, I mean, that is ambitious, to put it mildly. So I hope your health holds up and certainly gets better. I genuinely appreciate your time. You've been very gracious with it. And as always, I really appreciate your insight. Enjoy the training with Jon Jones. If you end up cornering him, great. If not, I look forward to seeing the fruits of your labor. Thank you so much, Gordon.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.